I'm here today with Robert Bier and Rolf Hawkins. These guys are from Integra. They've been with Integra for a long time. And they're going to walk us through the .4 models, what's coming up, hopefully sometime later this summer, later this year. I think we're all looking forward to it. I think, Rolf, you're going to start us off with a little quick line review of what's coming up. Let's get going.
So hopefully everybody can see my PowerPoint presentation here.
Yep.
Okay.
Post questions in the comment and I'll try to get to them.
All right. That's great. Yeah, to Mark's point, unless there is another DAC factory fire or Godzilla decides to make a reappearance after a long absence, then yeah, these new models should start shipping this summer and we'll all be happy campers finally. Rob and I are so looking forward to this. We've worked so hard on developing some incredibly competitive feature sets that we really believe that can totally revitalize the Integra brand name in the industry. So that being said, let's just jump right into it. I'm not going to do any kind of rehash of the past. We're all very familiar with the 2019 models, but if anybody has questions about those specifically, definitely hit us up on that. We're just going to jump right into the primary feature sets and technologies that really make the 2021 models stand out. So, CI-centric, of course, all of the partners that you can imagine and then some. As Rob likes to say, if there's somebody on here that's not listed, that didn't even make any sense. If there's somebody that's not on here, we probably will work well with them as well. It's just simply a matter of communication, but chances are it's not that difficult for another third-party control company to work with our product as well. But these are the primary ones that we all know and love. Now, of course, one of the carryovers that is a big differentiator of us versus them is that white background with the black text. That's great, really works well in low light environments, especially behind an equipment rack in a installation closet. All the controls known to the remote control and in the accessible for the GUI, the user interface, are accessible via the front panel. So if you do happen to find yourself standing in front of the rack, nothing has changed in that regard. So cosmetically, when you're looking at the new .4 models versus the .3, they're going to look virtually identical. It's what's inside that really counts and what really brings them to the forefront. All right, so yes, it's 2021 finally. Oh my God, we have new product. I'm very excited. 8K, that's the big boy. That's the big game changer versus 2019. Probably don't really need to get into this per se. I mean, it's obviously more pixels, bigger picture. You know, one of the things that's constantly coming up in the trades are all the so-called clever journalists saying, 8K is not important. 4K, you're fine with 4K. Well, remember when they said 4K was not important, that you were fine with 1080p? We all know in our line of work that the one thing that never seems to change is the customer's demand for bigger and bigger and bigger televisions and front projection systems. But the viewing distance, that's not what's changing. So when we go up in resolution, that's really key. So if you're still sitting 10, 12 feet away from your TV at a minimum, and you keep getting a bigger and bigger display, having that denser pixel structure makes all the difference in the world. So you're not going to suddenly start to see macro blocking and other things like that happen if you were to stay at a lower resolution on a bigger display. So yay, us, 8K is definitely the way to go. Now, wanted to point this out to everybody because it's somewhat of a confusion factor out there, not just for the customers, but even for some of the retailers out there. There's a little bit of confusion as to bandwidth for HDMI 2.1. If you look at the orange section over on the right, you'll see the 48 gigabits per second. That is in reference specifically to cable manufacturers. So if they want that ultra high speed certification, then they've got to pass a maximum of 48 gigabits per second. From a hardware side of things, however, though, the maximum is 40 gigabits per second. So don't ever let anybody get in your face and say, that Integra, it's only 40 gigabits per second. That's not full HDMI 2.1. Oh, yes, as a matter of fact, it is. From a hardware side of things, 40 gigabits per second is the hardware maximum, and that is for the foreseeable future. We've talked not just to our own engineers, but other manufacturers out there as well that we've partnered with. And as far as we know, there's no rumor, scuttlebutt, or innuendo that any hardware manufacturer for the foreseeable future is going to go beyond that 40 gigabits per second hardware maximum. So don't worry about the 40 versus 48. We've got 40. Cable manufacturers have to do 48. Now, eARC, of course, I'm sure everybody here understands ARC and eARC for the enhanced audio return channel. One of the reasons why I pulled up this image right here is because we are very strongly behind the gaming industry out there. As more people are staying home and working from home, the gaming platforms, whether it's PC-based or console for the new PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, boy, that's a mouthful. Gaming is becoming a real go-to for a lot of people to get away from the trials and tribulations of this pandemic era. So when you're plugging in these new consoles directly to your latest and greatest HDMI 2.1 smart TV, and you want to get that object-based surround sound and all that awesome information back into your home theater system, you do need eARC in order to communicate with these new HDMI 2.1 systems. And I'm also showing, if you weren't aware, we've got a new THX Ultra certified system from Magnac, the Cinema Ultra speaker system. So that's actually what's being shown in this diagram here, in case you were wondering. So we do have a full solution, not just for home movie, TV show watching, but also geared towards the gamer in particular. Another big advantage, and there are so many advantages, there are so many improvements under HDMI 2.1. We could literally spend an entire day going over each specific specification individually, but we're just going to hit on the primary ones. A big one, of course, again, not just for movies and TV shows, but also for the new game console platforms out there, high dynamic resolution or range. So as opposed to static HDR, which gives you a uniform processing for information in the brightest areas of the picture and the darkest areas of the picture that doesn't change from the beginning of the video signal to the end of the video signal. Dynamic changes on a scene-by-scene basis. And whether it's Dolby Vision or HDR10+, those are examples of dynamic HDR in action. So you're going to get even more lifelike representation on your TV than you would with static HDR. So dynamic HDR is not necessarily limited to HDMI 2.1, but it is part of the mandate that HDMI 2.1 devices have to be able to pass through and process dynamic HDR, not just static HDR. Really, again, for the gamers, and I want to sound like a broken record here because games, we have variable refresh rate. Now, there may be some live action content that will take advantage of this, but primarily this was something that was found predominantly on the desktop PC gaming industry. Over the last several years, there have been a lot of high refresh rate displays out there for the latest and greatest advanced video GPUs for desktop computers. But the idea behind variable refresh rate for games in particular, and something that the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 take advantage of, is that if we have a situation on screen where people are just talking to each other like this over a table, then there's not much really changing in the picture. So a lot of detail can be visible. However, when action starts to occur and things are flying around and the camera keeps moving about to follow different parts of the action sequence, on traditional fixed refresh rate displays, a lot of that action a lot of the detail in those scenes can go down dramatically because you're focused on a single character or several characters moving around the screen, not the background. So now we have the ability for HDMI 2.1 displays to lock on to what's in that scene and change the refresh rate on the fly from low frame rate, like what we're talking right now in this situation over Zoom, or higher frame rates as things change on the screen. So that's pretty cool for these newer TVs to not lose any detail in that picture the faster the action goes flying around. Another feature for 2.1 is auto low latency mode. When you plug in an Xbox Series X or PlayStation 5, when it goes through that receiver and into that new HDMI 2.1 capable display, it will automatically sense that it's a game console. It needs low latency. In other words, to decrease the amount of time between when you enter in a command on a keyboard or a gamepad, and then information is created in the console and then registered and rendered on that display. It decreases all those little inherent lags in time and gets you to the point where there's virtually no lag at all. And it will put that TV into a low latency lag mode automatically. You don't have to go into the menu of the TV and make any changes. It'll do it all automatically, so long as it's an HDMI 2.1 or an ALLM capable display. Not to confuse things, there are some 2020 models of televisions out there, like Sony, for example, that are not HDMI 2.1, but their 2.0B chipsets are ALLM capable. And they have said that they're going to do a firmware update for that for the last 8-9 months, and it still hasn't come out yet. So whether that's really true or not, we'll have to wait around and see. But at least all the newer HDMI 2.1 TVs, like one of the new LG models that Rob got his hands on about a week ago, that has ALL capability built in. Quick media switching, not game related, but really very important all the same. I know that when we went back to the first days of HDMI, I think we all remember getting calls from our customers and the installers, especially we're getting calls from customers saying, you know, man, I'm switching from my cable box, my Blu-ray player to my PlayStation 3, and I get a black screen for like 20 seconds. What the heck's going on? I want instant gratification. I want to see a picture immediately when I switch inputs. And that is something that has gradually decreased down to about 5-second average now when switching inputs on an HDMI 2.0 unit. But now with HDMI 2.1, if you have other 2.1 devices in the chain, then the lag, the blank screen that you would normally expect to see goes away when you're switching inputs. So that's a nice extra benefit to HDMI 2.1 there as well. So again, broken record time, games. We definitely have the market covered with Integra products for support of the new game consoles, the latest and greatest HDMI 2.1 displays, not just for the auto low latency mode, which the TV would go into automatically. That signal passes through smoothly from the game console to the TV through one of our Integra receivers, but also support for dynamic HDR, which changes as the scene changes, and that variable refresh rate for different types of material playing on the screen from the same source. So whether it's PlayStation 5 or Xbox, yes, we are ready. Now, HDR10 Plus is one of those alternate solutions to things like Dolby Vision, where it's not quite as accurate as Dolby Vision, but it's pretty close. And the best part about HDR10 versus HDR10 Plus, I should say, versus Dolby Vision is that it's free. There's no licensing fee for hardware manufacturers to support HDR10 Plus. So that makes a lot of companies very happy. And that's just another option for the customer. Not another way of Integra saying we're not going to lock you into a specific set of components from specific brands just to get the best picture quality. We're going to be as open a platform as possible to allow all these different audio and video signals to pass through to the display of your choice. This is a big improvement over 2019. Remember how in 2019 models we had that weird Zone B output on the back of the receivers for headphones? It was supposed to be for wireless headphones, even though you still had to have a wire between the receiver and the base station of the headphones. Now we're going completely wireless. So in addition to the Zone B option, we now have a Bluetooth transmitter with aptX HD on board, which is really fantastic, because not only is that better bandwidth for higher resolution material, but also a longer range for Bluetooth transmission and a more secure handshake. So you can really go well outside of your traditional field of range that you would expect for a Bluetooth device and still maintain that handshake and that strong signal between the receiver and your wireless headphones. So for the folks that you're putting receivers into that have an older family member living in the household with them that are constantly turning up the level of the receiver to the threshold of pain for everybody else when they're watching the news or their favorite TV show, there's now an option for them to have their own volume control with wireless headphones. This is the game changer, and Rob is going to talk about this a little bit more in detail going forward, but DIRAC Live, or DIRAC Live, as the Swedes preferred that we say it. This is by far and above one of the, if not the most important name in audiophile room correction out there today. Found in flagship recording studios around the world. DTS, for example, uses DIRAC Live when they're calibrating their own recording facilities. When they're doing mixes and masters for IMAX films, for example, they're using DIRAC Live. Found in some really state-of-the-art professional audio equipment, as well as in some very, very fine luxury automobiles as well. So just in a nutshell, really quickly, probably one of the single biggest influences that DIRAC has over the other room calibration systems out there is that it does impulse measurement in addition to reflected acoustic information measurements. So that impulse, that sound that that speaker makes right off before that sound has a chance to interfere, be changed by the unique acoustic properties of the room that you're in, DIRAC Live will get an accurate idea of what that speaker driver is really capable of doing before that sound gets interfered with. So then after it does that, it makes its measurement of what the room acoustics are doing with that signal, then it combines them together on the cloud and comes up with a solution for you that may be the perfect solution. But if not, you have the ability to go in and make almost a limitless number of adjustments to suit your own personal preferences or the needs of that specific client. So DIRAC Live, yes.
Will Robert be able to show us some of this DIRAC Live if we give him a shot?
Not in today's presentation, but he's got some interesting points to talk about going forward as we start to get into the custom integrator oriented end of things. This is something that we are currently experimenting with ourselves. We have pre-production samples that we're working with. So we are in the process of trying to figure out how to best create training content to really get the idea across. But as soon as we do have something that we feel is really solid, you guys will be the first to know, and you'll be able to let us know what your feedback is on that.
Great. So Robert, what do you have to share with us today?
Well, you know, Rolf is a very eloquent presenter, and he has the most amazing looking assets, and I'm completely different. 3 years ago, Joe Petrillo, the COO of Onkyo USA, wanted to bring in somebody from the field to help resurrect the Integra brand and get it straight, because let's be realistic. I mean, there's been some homogenization over the years with the other brands, but there's a lot of engineering reasons for that. But I was in the field, I was an Integra dealer, I lived through it all. And you guys know what I mean when I say I lived through it all. And when I got a phone call from a recruiter and he explained the situation, I was like, okay, this is something that I would like to do with my life, and come in and try to bring the field back into the boardrooms at Onkyo, right? Well, it was not easy, but for about 2 years, I sat next to a Japanese product planner and literally drew. They're extremely smart guy, but I literally had to explain why a rack in a 15,000 square foot home is in a utility room and the customer can't touch the knob on the front panel, and we need better command sets. So, you know, again, I'm just gonna kind of be dirty about this and just go live and show you these features that we've implemented over the last few years. So.
Excellent, let's see them.
Right on. So hopefully you can see that.
Yep, we can see it.
All right, very good. My computer's running a little slow here, so just a moment. So again, you know, to reiterate, I got all the phone calls from clients at 9 p.m. on Sunday night because one TV out of 12 that they want to watch the Super Bowl on was flickering. And yeah, HDMI is terrible, but I bring that passion to the boardroom, you know? So like, it hurts me in my stomach when I hear that there are folks in the field having problems with our devices, right? So the first thing that we tackled was, let's go in and make sure our command sets are all straight, right? So we had some issues where, because of the different software platforms, somebody would be at 50% on their Crestron panel and the receiver would be at 100. And it's because somebody was dropping in a module for a 5.4 for a different platform device. And so, you know, I went in there, I went to Japan and I straightened them all out. And I got to tell you, it took a little time to get them to understand why, but basically now all of our commands are set for, you know, proper volume ramping scales and things like that. So I'm the kind of guy that looks inside of the device and tries to think like it, because I know what it's like to have racks and racks full of network equipment and how they have to work together. So my goal was to make these as natively integratable with any control system. Part of that process, when we get into the Domotz stuff, was I remotely interrogated the DRC I had at my place with every single command until I would freeze it up. And I would send that data to the engineers, and they did find some bugs from like way back when, that an integrator is going to have like a hard time wondering why it keeps happening only on Tuesdays, right? So, you know, I understand that, and now Japan does, and they went in and fixed a lot of that stuff. So like Rolf said, I mean, if it's not on this list, our command sets are robust enough that it's going to work as long as they know what they're doing on their end. We're a Josh Premier partner. We believe in innovation. Once again, here at Integra, we're not going to stop. You're going to continue to see innovative features, but the important thing was to get the basics right, okay? So I put a sign on the Japanese product planner's desk that said, don't ask me for another feature until IP stability and HDMI stability are the best they could possibly be. And, you know, I'll show you some stuff coming up. So that's a DRX. It's in a design center in Crestron showrooms, 3 different design centers. I'm really tight with these guys. They're in New Jersey too. And believe me, it would not be sitting in there if it didn't work. So these are the most requested CI features. You know, selfishly, they were requested because I wanted to see them as an integrator, but that's not good enough. I had to do a bunch of surveys, and without feedback from the field, meaning you folks, none of this stuff would ever happen, you know, because we also have to make a product that somebody wants, and it can't be Rob's AVR. It's got to be an AVR built for the field. So the coolest part about DIRAC for me is that now you can be completely untethered from the AVR. You don't have to use that, that wired microphone. So $99 microphone on Amazon, USB mic, plug it into your PC, run the DIRAC software. It's going to run through the entire AVR setup without having to be in the same room as the AVR, or FaceTime in your buddy, or walkie-talkies, or running a temporary IR. You've got it now. You've got it wireless. Enhanced works with Sonos. I mean, we went through, I'm not going to go through each line, but a million revisions. Okay, really, actually, just like 4 or 5. But the truth is, all of these things were feedback from the field. So now we have the most robust works with Sonos integration out there. That's actually a legit works with Sonos. In fact, we do have in June another update that's going to solve a couple of little snags along the way, which are almost inevitable when you're dealing with making all these technologies work together. But we're in constant communication with the Sonos team. And I'd be happy to discuss this in gory detail to anybody who's willing to listen to me, but it's in there and it's the best. And the next revision is still, again, up to you folks, you know? So moving right along, remote monitoring. We are a Domotz partner. We work with OVRC Pro. We also work with Luxel Pro Watch. So what I'll do is just run you through a little bit of that screen share. So this is Domotz Pro device in my home here. You can see that right away, our devices just pop right up. They're recognizable immediately by the Domotz platform. And, you know, we pay for that on a monthly basis. So that's kind of commitment, you know, a testament to our commitment to making these products as customizable and also really, you know, when you get that call and you have that issue, you want quick, immediate, transparent understanding of what's happening in that environment. So we do have a custom integration where you can look at status, and I'm not going to go into each one of these. On top of that, we have a unique feature where you can actually unlock that Domotz device and share with the Integra support team temporarily. And you could see that we're in company with Crestron with that integration. So, you know, we're not playing around. We're doing what we said we would do, and it's right here and it's right in front of us. And then my favorite of all time right now is that PC setup. You'll no longer need to use that. We actually have a web interface. And what I'm doing is I'm actually linking through that, through Domotz. And in fact, also we're OVRC Pro compatible. So you could see that I spent a good amount of time with those folks to give us immediate transparency into what the environment's like that AVR is in. And also you could tunnel right in, and you could tunnel in through Luxel Pro Watch too. So basically at this point, you now have anything that you would have on the OSD or PC setup and more through our web interface, right? So now imagine you're with your laptop, you're in the room where the speakers are and the display device is. Now with DIRAC and a wireless mic and with this setup app, you no longer have to have the OSD up to really configure this device. I mean, in the beginning, there's a couple of forced agreement things, and that's because there's some technology from Google in there and stuff, and they kind of force us to put that in there, but I'm researching workarounds, so you don't even have to deal with that. I mean, I know that a lot of the feedback was like, hey man, we just want a receiver, like stop putting all that junk in there. And you know, they're also consumer devices, so it's not an easy task to build something that's perfect on both ends, but we're trying. So I'm not going to go through every one of these, but you could see like even just a simple thing like renaming the inputs, right? Like right here, I mean, boom. It's so quick and easy to do. You could do it from your smartphone. You could do it remotely via Domotz or OVRC Pro or Luxel Pro Watch. So now this is like the evolution of the AVR for the integrator. That's how I like to consider it. It's like the invisible things that, you know, somebody's not going to read on a spec sheet. In fact, this is password protected, and you could change that password. So your client's kid's not going to get in there and screw it up. You can back it up to a file right to your PC. You could upload from that file. You could store and recall here or factory reset. You could change the password. I like this one. If you're the type of team that likes to have stuff printed, or maybe you keep it in a binder in the rack somewhere, I mean, it's going to show you firmware version, basically all the information about the way your speakers are set up and things like that. Let me go back to this cheat sheet list I have here. So we just covered remote monitoring. Yeah. Web-based AVR setup, and I'm gonna show you a little bit more about that as well. Diagnostic functions. So, you know, this works, that works, this works, and all of a sudden that cable box makes everybody grumpy. So we have some features built in. This is a beta I have right now, but it'll be ready for prime time very soon. So you can actually go in and on each input limit things like HDR and Dolby Vision, and basically pare down a certain input for the actual device it is. Let's say it's an old school gaming system with HDMI 1.4, and when you switch inputs, you know, the truth of the matter is that nobody's perfect with that. And the reason why things like that happen is because there are HDCP timing handshakes and things that there's just no way that all the manufacturers could get right. That's why you see firmware updates on TVs constantly. And that's great and all, but when you're out in the field and you want to get paid and you know your client's very frustrated with that situation, maybe we can't fix everything, but we're going to give as many tools as we can to try to weed out where the issue lies. You know, so you could audio limiters, and this is going to be an extensive training in itself. Over here in this status area, I can turn on and off zones. So, you know, when it's like my backyard speakers aren't working, okay, let me jump on through OVRC Pro or Domotz. Let me go to web setup. Let me make sure that it's on. Oh, it's on. Do you have sound now? Okay, let me change the source, right? Boom. At least you're out of the woods and your client's happy when they have their friends over for their party. They did spend a lot of money, maybe $100,000 on a system, and the AVR is what, $1,200, and that's going to be the one that's going to give you problems. That's not fair, right? So also in here, which I can't really show you right now based on the way my system's set up. You can actually send test patterns to the TV. So what the heck, I'll send one anyway, but right now it's pinging the TV that this AVR is hooked up to, which right now it's not hooked up to anything because I have so much going on. And it will display that test pattern. So what does that mean? Well, that means if that test pattern's making it there, then your cabling's good. And it's more likely an issue from the source. And that's where you could go back and by source component, start to change EDID settings for older HDCP versions, older HDMI versions. And you know what? You may find the combination that makes everybody happy. Also, what's not on here right now is HDCP timing adjust. So when you are getting that blanking and the TV's not locking on, you can go and speed up or slow down the handshake with the TV for that input. So, I mean, basically what I asked the engineers was anything that they have in there that could help with situations like that, please make it accessible to the integrator. And on top of that, make it accessible through an easy to navigate system and not just from in front of the AVR where it does you no good because you can't see the TV. So you can also see down here, there's a virtual remote. So in the case where your client's like, hey, my surround speakers aren't working, or as they would say, the rears aren't on, you know, you could go in there and toggle through and keep an eye out over here. And I'm not even sure, based on the way this is set up right now, if it'll work, but you could see like I could change music mode and it'll show up on here what the music mode actually is when things are connected to it. It's just nothing's connected to. I have multiple AVRs stacked everywhere. What you're seeing behind me is an image from my, my theater room. And usually I have a 75-inch, yeah, you see, I just turned it off, but I have a 75-inch, but I went out and picked up an HDMI 2.1 TV to test the Xbox 120, 4K 120 with HDR and variable refresh rate and auto low latency mode, and everything passes through just fine. We don't have that HDMI 2.1 bug that you may have heard about. So what you see behind me is literally, you know, 444 RGB, 4K 120. That is 40 gigabits limit of the HDMI 2.1 spec that you're seeing there. And you're also seeing that in the info screen of the Integra. So let's go back to this cheat sheet for me here. So this is Rolf's favorite picture. He wants to put my face in there, but I felt a little bit weird about that. So, you know, just you could test cables in the back of the AVR. So if you're wondering if your cable's the culprit, well, plug it into the cable sat input and the sub output, and it's going to run tests through it and make sure that the bandwidth is available. The sync test, that's the TV's test patterns. The source test will tell you what's coming from your source component. EDID modes, HDCP version, limit modes, HDCP timing adjust. So now I know we're going over. So one last thing that I'd like to share is that this will be the first year that we actually have our engineers building our Control 4 drivers. You know, Crestron has certified drivers. We send them our AVR and they build them. That goes for Savant, right? So they all have our AVRs and they all have our protocol docs, and I'm in regular communication with them. But Control 4, typically the manufacturer would build their driver to taste. And if you go back to like a DRX5 and you look at this property screen, and any Control 4 dealer out there who does programming knows what this is. And there's really not a whole lot of information there, but there's a lot of wasted real estate, if you ask me. And I was programming Control 4 in like 2006. So I've been around the block with it. And I just would love when a manufacturer would put in like tons of information into system properties. So this is the new drivers. They will be, of course, SDDP. So you can just drag and drop in the model number. It'll find it on a network. We've had that for a while, and that continues. But you can see here that now it is like second to none with the transparency of the system. So you can actually even see your speaker settings right here through the Control 4 composer screen. And then there's a bunch of actions like making sure network standby is on, because a lot of times, you know, maybe a firmware update gets rolled out and accidentally that slipped by. Well, you can go back and put that back on right from this menu. So, you know, with all these different ways now to look at what the AVR is doing and to solve issues and to make changes, basically, we just want you to be able to get to that information from anywhere, from any one of these partners. So yeah, you can look at incoming signal information, outgoing signal information. Again, if they're like, hey, my rears aren't working, you can see if it's in 5-channel stereo just to make them happy, that sort of thing. And again, you could just tunnel right into web setup and change the default to 5-channel stereo for that input. And maybe that's what makes them happy. Also, you can custom map commands right to the Control4 custom button. So you don't have to go through programming for that anymore. I kind of stole that from the Oppo driver, from the Oppo Blu-ray driver that I really liked. And to Rolf's point with DIRAC, you can store 3 different slots for DIRAC, and those will be available here in programming. So if you want to give your client a button where it's just, let's say that the husband and he wants to listen to hi-fi and sitting in the sweet spot, it could automatically just hit that DIRAC slot that was measured right from that one point for that particular listener, as opposed to when you have a group of people over watching a movie and they're spread out, you could have another DIRAC setting where you took, you know, 13 measurements and tune the room for that. And by the way, the free Integra app, if you take the plug mic, okay, you buy an Integra, you open it up, the wired microphone's in there, you can go ahead and use DIRAC with that wired mic right through the Integra app and not have to get a PC involved. So basically, to tell you any more about what we have in store for the future probably wouldn't be a good plan right now, competitively.
You know, Robert and Rolf, I really appreciate this, you guys.
Yeah, so sorry that we went over. I know we started a little late. And,
no, it's okay. You know,
yeah, it's just a lot to cover, right?
there's way too much to cover. I wanted to make sure that people knew that Integra is alive and kicking and going to be cutting edge as always. And I appreciate that you guys have the insight to take care of our custom install dealers. That's what we're all about. So, and I don't see anybody has any immediate questions. If you guys can, if you want to chime in for a second, fire up. We can ask a few questions, and then we're gonna, like I said, we'll record this and we'll post it up. And find us on Facebook or find us on the website, fieldermarketing.com. And if you have any questions, I'm going to let these two guys get back to work. It sounds like they got a lot of work to get done here before the middle of summer.
Well, we really appreciate the opportunity, everybody taking the time to join us today. Hats off to you for your support. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your support.
I mean,
hey, Robert, when somebody asked us, how many models will we have?
Yeah.
There will be 3 new models to start.
3?
So, yeah, the 2.4, the 3.4, and the 5.4.
Hey, guys, I posted a link to the virtual Vox CES booth, and you could see the spec sheets on those 3 models right through that link.
Okay. I have those spec sheets as well. If anybody wants to drop me an email, I can get you connected. I see some fun comments, but thanks, you guys. Let's wrap up, and thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
We can be done.